Right on,
Thanks, man.
appreciate it. We don't have to talk about the bus fire thing because I know you've probably beaten that to death. But y'all, what the fuck happened? How did it start?
Man, so we still don't know. It was like the engines of those things are always like located back in the back of them and the rear of them. And you'll pretty much have like the back lounge, and right below that back, what's normally a bench seat across the back of the bus is the entire engine bay. And our bassist Chase was asleep back there.
Oh,
at the time, I was taking a piss in the bathroom in like the bunk alley hallway thing where all the bunk beds are in the middle of it. And yeah, I started seeing smoke coming out of under the sink, and
so y'all were
you could kind of smell like diesel or something. Which, you know, we've had issues with that bus before, so it's not the first time we had smelled like a weird smell, you know. And,
wasn't that shocking?
It was the, you know, very first bus we had ever been in, and so it wasn't the nicest thing in the world. But anyways, yeah, then as soon as I started seeing smoke, I heard him like yelling from the back, and he woke up, and literally the whole back lounge was just like smoke, and he was like coughing and woke up.
Were you guys parked or
and
moving?
It was a engine fire, and so no, we were rolling, dude. I mean, we were in the middle of it was Coleman, Texas, so it was like 5 miles north of Coleman, Texas.
It makes it significantly worse. Yeah,
we were on the way to Lubbock, and yeah, there's not even like a fire department out there, so it was like a volunteer fire department that had to come out, and like legitimately, like one of the guys that was out that, and you know, it's not their, you know, they did everything they could, you know, it's like a volunteer fire department, you know, they're getting out of work and stuff to go try to help you out.
Right.
But it took like probably 40 minutes or so before anybody got out there to help. And by that time, it was like engulfed in flames, the back of it. And
so did y'all just stand there and like watch it burn?
Yeah, because, I mean, we're all, you know, American boys. We were waiting for like this Bruce Willis scene to happen and it just explode in front of us.
You
and
keep backing up a couple feet every couple minutes.
Man,
like,
yeah. It's like I didn't know what to expect. And all the guys were obviously freaking out. I wanted to go in the front lounge so badly because I wanted to get my backpack with, you know, my MacBook and all this stuff was in there. It was just like easy just to like run in and grab it, hold your breath or whatever. And our tour manager was just like, absolutely not.
I depend on you to make a living, sir. You cannot go back inside that bus.
Yeah, whereas our fiddle player, Ben, I mean, he was like, he didn't give a shit. I mean, he went right back in, and Corey's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't do that. And he's like, yeah, I can. Grab my fiddle. Like, he just took his precious time getting all his stuff out of there, and everyone else was just in a total panic. So
I'm glad y'all all made it. We'll just jump in here.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Shane, for the remainder of today's show, we're joined by musician Shane Smith of the band Shane Smith and the Saints. Mr. Smith, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You're a Texas native. From Terrell, Texas, right? Is that how you pronounce Terrell?
Yep. Terrell, Texas, in between Dallas and Tyler. And then I went to high school and stuff like that in Kaufman. So kind of grew up in both towns, you know.
You played tennis?
Yep, I did.
Junior college. You don't strike me as a tennis guy.
I know. It's kind of an odd situation, but
were you just naturally good at tennis, and you were like,
no,
play tennis?
Both of my two older brothers both played, and my dad was a football player, and he was a kicker for like Notre Dame and the Kansas City Chiefs even for a little bit. And
no shit. Wow.
Yeah, and his dad was a huge, you know, like really successful football player at Notre Dame as well. A couple uncles were, and I think that you know, him being in that whole world for a long time, I think made him want us to have nothing to do with football in a way. Like,
Sure.
I think he had seen a lot of buddies with concussions and stuff, and the fact that I'm just not a big guy, you know, like it would not make sense for me to be a football player. But
yeah, we weren't built for football necessarily, you and I.
Yeah, and so anyways, when we were kids, that's like what they tried to get us into, and it was a weird thing because it's like this tiny, tiny town in Texas with zero
tennis community
emphasis on that sport at all, obviously, you know, and anyways, but both my brothers were really, really good players, and one of them went on to play at University of Arkansas, the other one at University of Hawaii, and I finished up in Austin at St. Edward's at a little Division II school. So.
Yeah, St. Ed's University.
That's
no
right.
CTE in tennis. That's the thing. You avoid the long-term brain damage when you play tennis over football.
For sure.
So you ended up at St. Ed's, like you said.
Yeah.
In Austin. and right there on South Congress, literally down the street from where we used to record.
Yeah.
Before you know it, you're forming a band, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start here. How old are you now?
So I would have been, I guess, 22, I think.
When y'all first formed up.
Yeah, and I moved down with two guys from that. One of them I was in classes with at Tyler Junior College, because that's where I originally started. I went to college, Tyler Junior College in East Texas for 2 years, and then summer of 2009 is when I moved down to Austin. A friend of mine, Matt, came down with me, who was also at Tyler Junior College. A guy that was on the drum line, Kurt Lammers. He was on the drum line at University of Arkansas, and while my brother was playing tennis at University of Arkansas.
Woo pig.
And he was a really good drummer and keyboardist and musician. And anyways, we ended up all kind of moving down to Austin together. And my girlfriend at the time, and why, she's my wife now, but she was going to UT, and so I was obviously in a hurry to get to Austin anyway. And so that's how we moved to Battle Bend, like right down by like Hills Cafe and all that stuff. And the house we moved into was actually a guy that was like a music manager for hip hop artists.
Okay.
And he had this like soundproof room. That's why I walked in there. I was like, oh, I like the soundproof.
Did it have a Scarface poster in it? That's how you can typically tell the hip hop recording room versus the other ones. You got to have the Scarface poster.
No, we had this really cool living room like right in the middle of this house. And it was all soundproofed, like homemade soundproof, and we just used to pretty much just jam like all night there. And so that was the original band. That was the original group of guys, that I was playing with. And it's not like we had like gigs and stuff like that. We were just more or less trying to play,
figure out,
as much
find
music
your
as
sound.
we can. And I was playing a lot of acoustic stuff. And now, given I'm going to school at St. Edward's this whole time, I'm trying to balance that whole thing. I didn't want to quit the sport because I had done it for so many years of my life. And I just kind of worked out a deal with our coach, and he was just really cool with it. He happened to play bass back in the 70s in Austin and was really,
of course he did.
And I wasn't like, a fantastic, like unbelievable player. And so he was cool with it and let me just kind of like, keep, as long as I showed up to practice and kept doing that, like, it was like, do what you need to do if that's what,
he knew you weren't going to be a tennis pro.
Yeah, I told him, I was like, man, this is, I just don't see, I don't have much of a passion for it anymore, and I don't see my future staying in this lane. And so, he was really cool with it.
Yeah, for a lot of the artists we talk to, a lot of musicians that I've gotten the chance to interview over the years, one of the things I like to ask about is when you first realized that this was an actual potential career move for you. So what were you studying in college, first of all, just to frame it up?
So I was in communications. I think you guys y'all have like media comm degrees or what do y'all have?
I
Journalism?
went to Texas State and got a journalism degree in mass comm. Yeah, so similarly.
And so I was in like some journalism classes going out of Tyler Junior College, and anyways, but I ended up with a media communications degree and just haven't really used it all that much,
Many of us don't. I got lucky. But so I guess like what was the point when you figured though, I could make a living doing this? Was it a moment in terms of forming the band, or was it when a song got written, or was there anything that clicked where you were like, I got to do this?
It took a while before there's that one moment where it's like, I want to do this as a career.
But is it realistic?
But is it
Can
realistic?
I make money?
And then there's a whole other element of like, hey, this, I think this is realistic, and I should stop like my day job or whatever. And when I got out of school, I was actually coaching tennis with my brother and he's still the head pro at River Place Country Club in Austin.
No shit. Okay.
And the one that played at University of Arkansas, he's still there. And anyways, and so that's after coaching there for like, I guess 2 years or 3 years out of college, that's when I kind of was like at a place where, this might be realistic to do full time. And we were playing enough and bringing in enough money to where I was able to kind of take a step back from it and do a few things here and there with
So kind of a
coaching,
slow
but not
progression?
really. Yeah. It was definitely like a safe play. I feel like I
Yeah.
wasn't just like, here we go, I'm just gonna be completely broke, and
Give it everything I got.
I tried really hard to keep a balance and tried really hard to work to make sure that it wasn't just like a total
Just a pipe dream.
disaster,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean,
you know?
similar situation for the guys that actually enabled me to start my career. They were working on forming a media company, chasing this dream of this thing that they wanted to do, but they had day jobs. And you have to get to the point where you feel safe enough to finally make the jump, basically, and then to be able to do that full time. And then I had like a similar jumping off point last year when I ended up having to form the company that now houses this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It was the question of like, all right, well now it's just me, right? Like, am I going to go do this by myself? And if I am, can I make enough money to make a living? And it's a very it's the most important decision that any musician, artist, or person who focuses on creative for a way to make money. It's the most important decision you make, is that jumping off point where you go for it, right?
Yeah.
Your first album dropped when? As Shane Smith and the Saints.
2013, I think it was January 2013, I think. I could be wrong on that, but
Up until Hail
Let's
Mary,
look it up.
though.
I'm gonna look it
Go
up
ahead.
so
Go
that
ahead,
so that I'm not off here. But I think it was that would have been the album Coast.
Coast. 2013, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
2013 is what Google says anyway.
I remember we had a CD release party at Stubbs indoors, the little room at
Fucking love
Stubbs,
Stubbs,
and
dude.
and yeah, it was a blast.
And then up until your 2019 album, Hail Mary, y'all had never worked with like an outside producer. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I worked with a producer when I was still living in Tyler, and I put out like a little just singer-songwriter album that was just under my name.
Sure.
That was called I'll See the Miles, and then and it was just super green, just pretty terrible songwriting and everything else. But
Figured it out, though.
I did that, and that was with a guy named Bob Gentry, super nice dude that actually he used to play bass for Tom Jones back in the day.
Very, very random.
In Las Vegas and all this stuff. And anyway, so he did a really great job on that, but that was the only producer I'd really worked with up until Hail Mary. We had Bradley Prokopi that he like kind of co-produced the album Geronimo with us.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the first time for us to bring in somebody that kind of had a lot of clout and had worked with a lot of guys. Like
So that was Mark Needham, the guy. y'all
yeah,
brought
Mark
in,
Needham
who
was
had
the
worked
guy
with
that-
Imagine Dragons, The Killers.
yeah, he's like responsible in a lot of parts for like the success and the discovery of a lot of those bands like Imagine Dragons and The Killers. And
Now, when I think of those two versus y'all, obviously you have a much more like Texas country twang and feel to
Yeah.
your music than Imagine Dragons or The Killers would. But
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that sort of the vein that y'all like? Why Mark Needham? I guess why that? How did that work? Like, what does that look like when you bring in a producer to help you with a record? Even
I think I wanted something very different, and I wanted something that was very out of the box. And at the end of the day, like we do play and have played for years and years. Our foundation is within that kind of red dirt,
Sure.
music scene, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've always been like an oddball for that, and that's intentional. I mean, that's just like our sound. I think is a lot different, especially over the years. It's changed and it's evolved to be what it is now, and the direction that I was wanting our music to go, and still, see it going is a lot more in just like a folk rock, whatever you want to call that, like a folk indie rock type of sound. More in line with bands like. Mumford & Sons to Kings of Leon to, even influences with bands like Local Natives and Lord Huron and all these guys. Like, that's the stuff that a lot of us listen to.
Absolutely. And you can tell that through the music as well. You guys definitely, what you were saying about being part of that kind of red dirt country genre, you guys bring a much needed kind of refreshing twist to it, especially as somebody that, I didn't grow up with a lot of that outside of Texas, but I had a lot of friends that grew up in Texas that kind of introduced me to the kind of like Cody Johnson, local Texas country type of stuff. And I actually had a buddy Chandler
who the fuck is Cody Johnson? Do I need to know that name?
Oh man,
You don't know Cody Johnson?
Dude,
He's like a Texas.
And he's like a sweetheart of a dude. Great
Really?
guy.
Oh,
He's
so
like a
now,
Texas
now I'm,
local
now I'm
legend.
an ass.
Yeah, pretty
now
much.
I'm an ass. All
He
right,
was
He
actually-
Cody
worked his
Johnson.
ass off for, I mean, he's like, I think, I want to say above like Chris Ledoux. I mean, he's like, I think he's like pretty much the most successful, according to numbers and streams and stuff like that, pretty much like the most successful independent country artist like ever.
It wouldn't surprise
Like
you.
of all time. Yeah.
He
I
kinda
think he pushed like 70 or 60,000 tickets at Houston Rodeo, for
Oh,
example.
It doesn't surprise me.
Like,
He's
I mean,
massive
that's
in
like,
Texas.
that's crazy, dude,
That's
for an
nice.
independent act, you know, and he just did like a music video with Reba McEntire. And I mean, we were touring with him when he was in a van, you know, like
That's
we were
crazy.
playing with bands like that, even
Yeah.
though our sounds don't match up, like they're some of our, you know, closest friends.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like
And,
that's a very tight knit community, especially when you're kind of going to the same shows a lot, kind of on the same type of grind. It's
Hitting
really
the same
easy.
venues.
For sure. I mean, I don't care what you sound like. If you're doing the same thing and you've seen where each other have come from and you've seen what each other have gone through, it's just like, yeah, we're, you know.
And you can feed into each other, sort of. You take that energy away from each other, and,
Yeah.
and especially being on the road. Let's talk about being on the road a little bit. Like the touring
It's
aspect.
just been sparse.
Yeah,
here
that's,
lately.
Yeah.
that's why I want to
Yeah.
hit on it, because it's obviously touring is for most musicians, I would say. It is your main source of income. It's the way you can promote your album, get your streams up, keep the money coming in. It's a big focus, obviously. 2020 was a fucking nightmare for this.
Yeah.
Most musicians were unable to tour. Your touring situation, totally different, right?
Yeah.
Being a touring band, let's say, 2018, 2019, how many shows were y'all doing a year? Like 100?
2018, 2019, I would have said probably closer to 160 or something like that. Like,
Which is that's a grind. That's a hustle. That's a
yeah.
lot of time on
there
the
was
road.
a period of time, like in 2016, I would say somewhere in there, we were doing like, I think we spent over like 220 days or something like that on the road.
Whew.
And that's not shows, but I mean like just being away.
Right.
And in terms of shows, I have no clue what the number even would have been. It probably would have been upper, 180 to 200.
So what was the shift in 2020 then? I know there was a point where we all realized as a society basically like, oh, this is going to take a little longer than we initially fucking thought.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So what what
when it
like,
first happened, it was just like,
Couple
my
months.
wife and I were going to go on a vacation to Hawaii, and we had planned this out for a long time, and I was like stoked about it. And all of a sudden,
You can't
you're
go.
starting to get the news on it, and you're like, wait, no, this isn't happening. There's no way this is happening. We pushed it back 1 month.
like
And
that
they
would
had,
be enough.
they had
right?
cut off travel, and they're like, we'll push it back a month. It'll be fine. It was just like looking back on it like, oh, boy.
Yeah, dude, I look back on 2020 and I spent like 95% of the year in the same 20-foot area of my living room, just like sitting there watching the TV like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of hilarious right when the pandemic first started back in March. That's right when Ross and I first started talking about a serious possibility of me moving down to Austin.
Right.
And I remember when the first lockdown started.
great timing.
Ross was like, yeah, I don't think this will last that long. Let's just wait it out. Like, we'll bring you down in like a month or so when everything's kind of passes by. We're like 3 months into this thing.
Yeah.
He's like, we should probably just go ahead and get you down here because I think this is gonna hang out.
isn't
For a
ending
while.
anytime
Yeah,
soon.
this is not going
Just
away.
fucking mask up and we'll throw you on an airplane. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But what did y'all? Because that moment hits where you're like, well, the touring stuff is not the same this year. So what did you shift focus to?
Man, it's a weird deal because I was in the process of, actually trying to change our entire kind of business plan to be off of the road a lot more, and like driving up more, revenue streams like streaming and like YouTube and like,
So you were already working
our
on
online
something
store
like
and things like. Oh, dude, I was totally like I had it kind of mapped out, and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, you're forced into it, like,
Yeah.
and it, it's. I was so petrified of making that change and that commitment, going into COVID.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it just happened, and it was like, okay.
Now you have
so,
no choice.
Yeah, so it's like, it's not even a question of, okay, I guess we're doing this plan. It's like, no, it's an even more extreme plan.
Right.
And can you survive?
Right.
Like, what are you going to do to survive? Because, like, you can't count on a stimulus bill. You can't count on any of that stuff. You have to figure it out, and you got to do whatever you have to. And so we immediately just kind of went to the drawing board, started driving up all kinds of like trend related like merch items and like, you know,
Just seeing how you could move the needle.
as stupid as this is, like we did like a Shane Smith and the Saints, like a Corona, like a shirt
Yeah.
and like random stuff, you know,
But
like
that's what sells.
just the dumbest stuff, like a Joe Exotic vibe of a Shane Smith and the Saints. I mean, we were doing anything we
Okay,
could.
I want one of those.
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
yeah, for sure. And it worked though. And like our online sales were like, I mean, we've been like hitting record numbers on our online store. Our fan base, you know, they're a super loyal fan base. Like it's not like a typical I don't know. I feel like for years and years through the touring, every single night I would be at the merch booth, and Bennett, our fiddle player, the guy I pretty much started it with, we would be at the merch booth shaking hands, taking photos. I'm talking for hours until
Yeah.
every single person was out of the bar.
Absolutely.
You do that for what, 9 years straight?
You're
Build
gonna
that
build a
connection.
fan
And
base.
it's like, dude, it's a really tight knit. We have actual kind of relationships, I feel like, with our fans, and every fan of ours has a story. It's not
Absolutely.
like oh yeah, I went to the show, it was a good show. No, they have a story of like, oh, my daughter had their birthday and we were in the parking lot, we saw them, they played a couple songs for it.
man-
Like everyone has a thing like that. And
Absolutely.
so when all of a sudden this stuff happened, and you give people like that an opportunity to support you
And keep
on,
you
on an
going.
online store, they keep
Yeah.
you going. I mean,
Absolutely.
period. And you know, I've said it so many times, but like I can't thank our fans enough, because you know, if it wasn't for that type of fan base and commitment or whatever, it would have been way more difficult than it has
Similar-
been for us.
A lot of parallels between the Ross Bolen Podcast and Shane
Yeah.
Smith and the Saints in that way, where we are not, you know, we're not Joe Rogan. We're not one
sure.
of the biggest shows in the world.
Right.
But we built in a way over the course of years and years very intimately with our fan base, to where it's a hell of a lot more than just a relationship. Like it's a much
Yeah.
more intimate relationship than most shows have with their listenership.
Yeah.
And in that same way, like that, you know, that to me is the most important part of what I do. Like my relationship with the fan base, the listenership, the people that are being impacted by this stuff, and then the stories that they bring to the table.
Yeah.
Those are the things that keep me going, keep me creative and motivated. And you know, I mean, I even have one for y'all. Like your song "All I See Is You." When I met my girlfriend, that was one of the songs that sort of became one of our
Yeah, yeah.
songs, you know. And then you
For sure.
share that thing with each other, and then conversation developed where now you're on the show. So
Yeah, for sure.
it's like that's one of my things about music, about just art in general, that the way it moves people and can bring people together is a very powerful thing. And in 2020, we saw so many musicians like yourself have to turn to their fan base and be able to say, look, we never seen this before.
Yeah.
We're going to need your support and your help to make sure that not only that we get through this, but that we figure out what the future of this looks like. So from that perspective, what do you see this year? Like, what is 2021 looking like do you think we will get back to a place down the line several months from now where we've got some live shows with these limited
think so.
capacities?
I think so. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than whatever, you know, what you want to say is next month, we'll be good. What you want to say is, 2 months from now, whatever. I think realistically, by the end of this year, we'll definitely be back at concerts and stuff like that. I think that it's going to take years, though, before people can get past the complex of what this has caused, though.
Do you think
know what I'm
it'll
saying?
ever go back to the way it was?
I think man, I don't even know. I want to say yeah, obviously.
So do I, but it's like looking at it,
It's
I go to live music shows a lot, man. I fucking love them. The
Yeah.
problem is I don't trust the other humans at the damn thing to be
Right.
responsible. So that's where I'm like, I just don't know from a timing perspective how or when we get there. So the kind of big picture thing that you already touched on is like 2020 forced you to start to implement some of those strategies, to start to change up. So clearly in the future, what we'll be looking at is more of a hybrid situation where you have to find these other streams of revenue. You also have the live shows, and that's certainly going to be a part of it still. Is there a positive in this? You said 100 and whatever shows in a year, man. You're on the road 240 consecutive days or some shit. You are already looking for a way to sort of be able to dial that back. I think that grind, although necessary, especially your first few years, is a grind. It will grind you down, right? So is that like a silver lining in this, that it kind of forces the music industry and musicians to find a different potentially less demanding version of their lifestyle and work that could still make money.
I don't want to speak for anybody but myself, but like
I demand you speak for the entire industry.
I mean, I think that for me, like 100%, there were massive silver linings with it. Obviously, just through this conversation, like y'all know that. But for everyone else, I think that once again, it's forced not just musicians, but every single workforce or whatever to be innovative and figure it out and get creative and find a way, right?
And not get complacent, because
complacent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I guess what I would say to that. I think in a lot of ways there has been, and for me, I think like looking to the future, I just I wanted to get back to normal and everything like that, but at the same time, there's been a massive silver lining for me with getting in time on the home front and actually having a life, and having some kind of some kind of normalcy that I didn't even realize how badly I wanted, and
that's a big piece of it. Yeah.
And so if I can find a way to meet in the middle coming out of this, and still do shows, but not anywhere near like what we were doing before, and maybe put more of an emphasis on recording and things like that. That's what my passion would be moving forward. I think is like I want to build my own small studio and just start being able to just churn out
music,
even if it's covers of songs like that I wish I'd written type of a thing. And I would love to be able to do that.
That's sort of the impact I see. In media as a whole, not even just music, everyone is figuring out like we're going to need different means of distribution and promotion. Basically, we're going to need different and we're going to need to be for a lot of the musicians I've seen. It's like, if I can put out 2 albums a year, maybe I can make up the back end on some of the streaming and the live show stuff that I'm missing out on or whatever. So it's
It's a long-term investment,
hustle is changing.
too, like
oh, absolutely.
You think about that. You think about content and stuff like that. I mean, who knows where that goes? Or where that's going to lead, because it's just like so much of it.
Well, especially
in
today's day and age with music, anything that you put out, there's always the potential for virality there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you put out a cover that a lot of people are really loving that song at the time, and you put a little twist on it that people really connect with.
Yeah,
that's a lot of exposure.
That's a ton of exposure. I mean, look at artists like Lil Nas X that popped off with the Old Town Road. He released that one single, and 3 months after or 6 months after he released it or whatever, it's now 14 times platinum 2 years later.
I think it's now the most successful single in the history of music, if I'm not mistaken.
It is. And so things
it's
like
so
that,
crazy. That's
just
so
like
crazy.
what you were talking to about longevity, I feel like that for a lot of musicians in 2020, they're like, well, if I can just like really grind on my craft, like really perfect my voice and like what I'm putting onto an album or a single or anything like that, that's my best chance at kind of success right now. And like to put a little bit more effort onto that front as opposed to the touring side, which as a consumer, I'm stoked for because it shows that artists are putting much more time and effort into the content that I'm listening to.
Well, the focus goes back to, it feels like this is like another one of the silver linings. The focus goes back to the music, right? Touring and the tour life is very consuming, and you're on the road, and it is a grind, and you do get worn down, and there's a lot to overcome, and it's the constant figuring everything out and moving all your shit with you and avoiding bus fires like y'all had. I mean, that's a lot, man. And to be able to take a step back and focus on the music and the craft and the songwriting and the singing and really get back to your roots. Look, as a society, we all needed that on some level, right? Like for every single one of us last year, like you said, no matter what profession you're in or just personally, you were forced to stop and take a look at your life, the way you've been doing things, your whole fucking setup, and say, now what?
Right.
Which is one of the coolest things to me, is to see all the different ways people have overcome and adapted.
Right.
Right? Because that's what all human beings always do. We overcome and adapt. So to see the music industry, in this place, and especially in the midst of 2020, trying to figure out what the hell are we going to do? And now having gotten to speak with a few musicians and see that there is first of all, there's been a lot of shifts already, and then there's a lot of positive momentum in these other areas that you've spoken to. It's just cool, man.
Yeah,
it really brings me a lot of hope.
Doubt. And it's also, it's kind of weird because something that, how I was saying I'd kind of like tried to put this plan together, on like getting off the road a little bit, and even before COVID happened. And the thought, the frame of mind that I was in was like, where do we spend most of our money? It's when we're on tour. It's like the credit card bills, the whatever for your expenses, your overhead, everything. The cost is so high. Now, our guys are all, they're on salary. So it's like, I don't mean their cost. I mean just like road expenses and
food,
like,
lodging,
and diesel and everything. And it's insane when you look at what those expenses are when you're full time, like out there. And what I've found, or what has been, kind of proven and backed up through all of this is that that's absolutely accurate, that we can be still somewhat profitable even without being out there and without like touring all the time and doing all this stuff, because how much lower our overhead is as a whole.
Absolutely.
Much less complicated in terms of your balance sheet.
So much simpler, and if we can maybe find a middle ground of that to where we are doing runs, but they're concise and they're smart and they're planned out, they're mapped out. It's like when we're working, it's like there's no time wasted while we're away.
So more strategic.
Yeah, just way more strategic. And when you're in the grind, dude, like our band, we are, especially like a couple of years ago, we were some scrapper dudes. Terrible conditions and like, just would just show up and look like shit. And like, and like other bands are even looking at us, like rolling up like, oh my God, these guys, we're always late. We're always just like, it's just chaos. And
asking to borrow a drumstick.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, it broke a string. You got any strings? Like, no, dude, I don't want to give you my strings. Like, I can't tell you how many times like Randy Rogers band or like, whoever has like had to give me guitar strings because I just didn't have my shit together. But I don't know. It's just like, I feel like coming out of this, it gives you time to think. Yeah. Whereas when you're in the middle of it, you can't think. You're just going. You are existing and you're trying and you're working your butt off, but you're also wasted half the time or more than half the time.
Yeah.
And it's just hard to stop and just like think about what are we doing here, like, and there is no, there isn't a fraction of the strategy that there can be,
Absolutely.
When you're forced to stop and just think. It's just
Absolutely.
like, what are we doing?
But I'm touring.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sure on some capacity, like with all the support and outpouring of support from your fans. By the way, I'm looking at the merch store right now. All the stuff on there looks incredible. ShaneSmithMusic.com/store. Seriously, you guys did a fantastic job with merch. But I'm sure with all the support that your fans gave you, buying all your merch, keeping you, above kind of the line throughout the pandemic, you have to be on some capacity pretty excited to get back out there on stage and like show them how much that meant to you, right?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's no doubt. Like, we had made a post, like, I guess it was like last night, that was just kind of saying, it's like which town needs a Saints show, like ASAP, like once this stuff is done. And, and you expect to get like feedback on that, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of comments of people, that are just like
so excited to see
just
you guys
like
again.
St. Louis or New York or Brooklyn,
please
or
God, come play us
LA or like where, just like all over the place and in different countries and everything else. And it's just like you kind of stuff like that kind of reminds you like, man, I do need to make sure that we pay this forward and try to cover our ground. Once we do come out of this, like I need to make sure that we kind of get out there and give people shows, and,
Absolutely.
and kind of hustle there for a little bit and make sure that we're checking all of our boxes, So.
Of course. I've got one more for you before we let you go. When you're getting into this, you start the road grind. You meet a lot of guys. You just spoke to the fact that you end up in a situation where you're having to bum guitar strings off like Randy Rogers band or whatever.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that you met that stands out as somebody who sort of gave you guidance in the way of showing you how this whole shit was going to work, right? Because everybody kind of has, especially in music, you kind of have somebody that you opened for at some point that kind of gave you the ropes or showed you, hey, man, this is how this hustle works, or taught you some of the lessons or whatever. Yeah. Anybody in particular that stands out to you as like a really meaningful interaction?
Man, it's a combination of a lot of different guys. Early on, there's a guy that's way more like in line with just more country and red dirt than our sound, but at the same time he was really kind to me and took the time to talk and like just give me guidance like that. Was Aaron Watson. And but now given that was like back before I even had a band and was like trying to get a band together and stuff like that. And then after them, it was Turnpike Troubadours. We did a ton of shows with Turnpike Troubadours back in the day and became really, pretty close with a lot of those guys and learned a lot through them, and just being around them. And we've done a lot of stuff with like Randy Rogers' band. Randy Rogers' band has taken us under their wing plenty of times. But like all the way to like Aaron Lewis from Stained. We've done like, a couple shows with him before. And even he, like, I was
Stained?
Yeah.
Like,
Aaron Lewis. Man, he's doing like a country thing now.
No shit.
And and we've played a couple festivals with him, and even he, and I've only hung with him like twice or something, but it's like at the same time I'm on the bus with him till like 4 a.m, and he's like, just everybody I feel like is pretty willing in this business to try to give like any kind of feedback or whatever.
How fucking hard it is, right?
Yeah, because it's like you can absolutely destroy your home life. You can absolutely
everything. You can
destroy your health. You can destroy so many things. You have the opportunity to in this career path.
Yeah.
And so, some people are more willing to talk about that and give guidance on that than others. But at the end of the day, we've had so many people that have been just cool, with us over the years.
If you had to give a piece of advice to like a young up and coming musician who, 18, 20 years old is just starting to try to get into the hustle, what would it be to put you on the spot?
Just starting to get into the hustle.
Like, just trying to get where you're at. Like, what is one of the things you learned along the way that's like, goddamn, I wish somebody had told me this shit. It would have made it a lot easier on me.
Man, I would, there's two flips of the coin. A part of me would be like, know what you're getting into. But the other flip of it is you almost have to not know what you're getting into to be able to give the commitment that you have to give
it's fucking hard. It's always with him, man. I'm like,
you have to be blind, essentially. Like
I don't want to rob him of the experience. You know what I mean? Like with Chris, he's 21. I've been doing this for a decade. Like similarly with music, you don't want to take the experience of that learning curve away from somebody either. That can shape you as you grow into it.
There's one thing that I think I need to comment on that is like, there are two ways. There's multiple ways of doing it, not just two, but I'm just going to lay out two with music, right? One of them is based around content and your recordings, and one of them is based around grind and showing up and never saying no when an opportunity shows up, right? We went that second option, and it was just a grind, nonstop. I wish we would have been able to focus a little bit more on the recordings on the upfront side. And because for me personally, when I hear our recordings, I don't love them. Like I don't like, I love some of them. But I feel like we could have done so much better. This is permanent. This is out there. It's on the internet. It's on Spotify. Yeah. It's everywhere. And that's a commitment when you're, publishing that and you're putting it out there. There's so many moments that I hear our recordings, I'm like, God, dude, I wish we had,
adjusted.
You just so
made it
up in it.
Yeah, but like you're just churning stuff out and you just move on. And I feel like I would say to somebody coming up in this is like, take the time to like focus on both of those and try to balance both of those because they're equally as important. Like certain people really get fortunate in that they have a killer recording very early in their career.
Sure.
And that just, especially nowadays, because
it can solidify
it's
everything.
Online, it's everywhere in an instant, right? And you get the right person reposting it.
Absolutely.
What does that do? It's like all of a sudden, boom, it happens for you. And it takes more of a grind than that, but like that happens realistically with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And so you gotta, especially nowadays, if you're coming up and all this stuff, like you gotta keep a focus on both of them. It's not just a grind. It is very much a focus on how good your product is that you're putting out, i.e. the recording nowadays and the music video or whatever it is. But there's also that aspect that's equally as important when you're first getting into it, which is the grind, and it is the being willing to show up and always say yes, be respectful, and stay humble, But
right on. Shane, thank you for taking the time today. Everybody go listen to Shane Smith and the Saints wherever music is played. Follow at Shane Smith Music on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/Shane Smith Music. What'd you say the website? ShaneSmithMusic.com. You can grab apparel on there as well. Go support the squad.
Yeah, and Bands in Town is where our tour dates are. So when we do have tour dates back, we still have been able to do some, and like next weekend we're supposed to be doing a few dates, and but yeah, Bands in Town is a awesome app. I try to get everybody to go there and track us on Bands in Town because you can be notified and all that good stuff. But yeah,
much appreciated, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys.
Have yourself a great rest of your Wednesday.
Yeah.